It's no secret that writing can be lonely work, but does it really have to be? Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, you'll get insights into the tricks, tips, and production habits of writers from every level of the biz. From best-selling authors to those launching their first novels, you're sure to be in the company of friends as we encourage great writers to divulge and share their secrets. This is the Great Writers Share podcast with your host, best-selling author, Daniel Wilcox.
Hello and welcome to the Great Writers Share podcast with me, Daniel Wilcox, where every week I invite some of the friendliest and most hardworking writers around today to join me on the show and discuss everything that makes them tick, roar and bounce. Today's day is I should have checked this first, 4th of February, and we are streaming ahead into the year. We are already into the second month. 2020 is underway. I hope your 2020s are going great so far. I know that I've been keeping myself busy, getting a lot done, but it's crazy how quickly time comes around and how the year blurs by, particularly the older you get. I think we all know that it comes at some point, and I know I'm not the oldest person on the planet, but still every year it just gets faster and faster, and it never seems like enough time just to get the things done that you need to, which is why it's always important to prioritise, and that's what I've been trying to spend the last week doing. Been doing a lot more planning in the books that I'm currently working on. I've got a series underway, which is probably the most planned I've been in a book for a while, more so because it's going to extend over a 3 to 4 book arc. And I found that having that plan, even if you don't stick to it, has been massively helpful just for getting you off in the right direction and knowing whereabouts you're heading. Because normally I'm someone that tends to not entirely pants a plot, but I will have a core idea, I'll sketch it out, and then I'll just hit the track running. And this is the first one where I've taken that series and gone, you know what, I'm going to give it a solid plan, get it underway, and it's working out well so far. I'm about, I want to say, a third of the way through the first draft. And it's exciting. It's going to be a little bit that's cut, I think, probably trimmed down a bit in edits. But no, I'm enjoying it so far. What else have I been doing? So I have updated my website. That's brand new. It's not live yet because it's currently in the transfer window of switching domains from who I was with, which was Wix, and who I'm with now, which is Squarespace. No particular allegiance to them all. I think both offer their own bonuses, their own pros and cons. The Wix websites are very, very easy to design, but you don't really have that structure in the same way that Squarespace does. So Wix, for people that don't know, is a drag and drop creator. Anything you can put anywhere, it doesn't really matter. You have to, as an additional step, go in and optimize it for mobile manually, however you want. Whereas Squarespace is drag and drop, but it drops into specific structures. It splits on sort of a grid in the background. It just makes it easier to manage. And that was what I was looking for, was something that was a bit more easy to manage than having to, if I want to move one thing, shuffle everything else around. Squarespace kind of does that for me. So I am also working on putting a blog on the Squarespace site as well. So one thing I've wanted to do for a while and I've not found a good way to do it with Wix is to install a blog. Not really so much for not really so much for other people looking at the work that I'm doing, but more so just because I want to keep myself accountable. I want to have some kind of track of what I'm doing, and if I drop a couple of nuggets that people enjoy along the way, then that's fantastic. And yeah, the website is looking brand new and shiny, and I love it so far. But I'm just waiting for that final switch in which I can announce it it's live, and it's going to be exciting. And there's a good chance that so what day will it be when this episode launches? So by 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th of February, it might be live. Check it out. Maybe not. We'll see. If it's still got a Wix ad banner at the top, then it hasn't transferred over, but I'll keep you updated on that. And one thing I did want to do as well, just on this intro, is I've been listening to a lot of podcasts this week, and there is a lot of good content going out there for authors. And I guess it's kind of unusual for some podcasts to shout out other podcasts that are working in the same arena, but I've been listening to a lot of different writers' podcasts and being really impressed by the caliber of the podcast. They're teaching me a lot. The guests are on there. They know what they're doing. And I just wanted to shout out a few of those. And the first one is the Unstoppable Authors podcast, which, even though I was a guest on there myself a couple of weeks ago, it's no allegiance to that at all. I've been listening to it for a while, and the girls are fantastic over there. Listen to their episodes today about social media, and they've got some really good nuggets of wisdom for people looking to up their social media game, the do's and don'ts, kind of a very practical look at how you operate social media as an author and the platforms that you can be working with. The Career Author is another one. My guys, Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon. Jay Thorne, a previous guest of this show, and Zach Bohannon, a future guest of this show. And they're just doing fantastic things over at the Career Author. They go a lot into the mechanics of the publishing market, the world. They speak between themselves about their mindsets, their projects going on, and there's sort of a lot of really good content over there. And also Rebel Author podcast. So again, a former guest of the show, Sasha Black, and the Rebel Author podcast. Been listening to that, and she's been killing it over there, just getting people on who are of a solid caliber to teach what it is that they're trying to teach. Because you find a lot in this industry, I say a lot, sometimes in this industry, you get people who talk the talk but haven't necessarily walked the walk, and Sasha's doing really well at curating that list of guests which know what they're talking about, and they give solid bits of wisdom. And one additional thing, one that I didn't put on my list, which I've just reminded myself of, if you're not already checking out the Writers Inc. podcast, which is Jay Thorne's new one, then go over and check that out. He's recently had an interview with the one and only James Patterson, which is it's mind-blowing. James Patterson's obviously like the godfather of current publishing and authorship, and just check it out. It's got a really good interview over there, and that's in collaboration with his buddy JD Barker, who's a pretty big deal as well. So check those out. It's well worth it, and I'll stop rambling about other people's podcasts now, so you can listen to this one. So my guest today is Steff Green, who is an author from New Zealand, and she is this conversation was really inspirational. It was one of the ones where you come off from talking to the guest and you just feel fired, you feel pumped, you feel ready for it, because she is not only a successful author in her own right, she's a speaker, she runs courses, but she's also been declared legally blind, and she has just made a absolute whopper of a career by just powering through and doing the thing that she loves. And I think at the end of the day, that's what anyone who is listening to this podcast is looking to do. And I think we go a lot into different things in the conversation. Some of the main points we go into is one of them being the mental shift in writing what you think you should be writing versus writing the things which gain traction. So when people are putting out content, sometimes you might find that the things that perhaps aren't your go-to, but things that you also love, are the things that take off. And it's about managing that mindset in terms of, on its basic level, money versus sort of the art. And there is a way to combine them both. Steff goes really sort of, she really elaborates well on that choice for her, how she managed to ride the wave and make a career that she's happy with and still enjoys along the way. We go into the importance of habits and delivering to your own promises. So people who are regular listeners of this podcast know that I'm a sucker for habits. I absolutely love it. I like teasing out habits of authors, guests, and just seeing what it is specifically that they make work, because I selfishly go away and try and incorporate those into my life and see how they work. But that's the only way you can learn, is by trying different things and getting it out. But we go a lot into habits and making sure that you are not only delivering for other people, you are living up to your own promises and being accountable for yourself. And we go into setting boundaries with the day job. If you're currently working a day job and you're thinking, I don't have time to write, I'm working through lunch breaks, I have to do this, I've got this deadline. We talk a lot about into setting boundaries within the day job and remembering what is important in your life, because when you are 70, 80, 90, when you've left this planet, what is it you want to be remembered for? So we go into a lot of deep stuff here, and I really enjoyed talking to Steff. Update on Patreon. We have no new patrons this week, but if anyone wants to get involved and pledge to support the show for as little as just $1 a month, you can head over to www.patreon.com/greatwritershare, and there you can donate for as little as $1 a month and get instant access to all the different bonuses and advantages, including asking guests our questions. So the segment at the end where we have our guests literally just answer anything that the patrons put out there, that could be you. And all you have to do is go over to patreon.com/greatwritershare. And without any further ado, we're going to go straight into the interview with the one, the only Steff Green. Steff Green is a USA Today best-selling and award-winning author, blogger, metalhead, and heavy metal maiden living in an off-grid home on 4 acres of rural paradise in New Zealand with her cantankerous drummer husband, 4 cats, a menagerie of farmyard animals, and their medieval sword collection. She publishes dark fantasy and science fiction under the name S.C. Green and paranormal romance as Steffanie Holmes. Her most popular books are set in the fictional English town of Crookshollow and are described by one reviewer as dark and steamy, a gothic delight. All of this has been found despite Steff being completely colourblind, photophobic, and legally blind. In 2017, she was awarded the Attitude Award for Artistic Achievement, which recognises achievement in the disability sector, And in 2018, she was a finalist for a Woman of Influence Award in the Arts category. Steff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, just going through that intro, there's a lot to dive into this interview that I kind of want to get stuck into. But my first question for you might be one that you're not expecting, and that is, why do you hate black jelly beans?
They're just gross.
Someone who described himself as a metalhead. The black ones you think would be your number one go-to?
Oh yeah, you would totally think so. But no, I'm all about like the red ones, like the fruity, the berry flavored ones. But black licorice. It's like licorice, but not good licorice. It's just blah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a fan of anything licorice at all, really, unless it's alcohol, in which you can just force it down your throat. But let's not take this interview in that direction so early. So, Steff, I'd love for you just to give a little bit of background to my audience. We've got where you are now. We've got some of your achievements along the way. How did it all get started for you? Where did the writing bug bite you, and how did it all begin?
It's a super, super, super long story, but I will try and keep it really short, relatively short. So, like most writers, I have always wanted to write books. Always. I used to write lots and lots when I was a kid. But I always I didn't actually, well, I kind of wanted to be a writer, but I always wanted to be a writer and an artist and something else. And since I was about 7, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And so that's what I went to university for. And I got an honours degree, and I did all these digs all over the world, and worked in some museums, and it was really, really amazing. But it's quite, when you go out into the real world, out of academia, it's quite hard to get work in that field, like paid work. And it's doubly, triply, especially hard if you are like me and you have an eye problem. And people sort of look at you and go, well, I'm kind of happy for you to work for me for free, but if I'm going to pay you, I think that, I don't really want to pay a blind person to handle artifacts. And so when I was trying to find a job, I kept getting pushback for stupid reasons, which had much more to do with people's misconceptions about what a vision impaired person or a blind person can do than they had to do with what I could actually do. And I got a bit upset about it. And my husband sort of said to me, well, you could kind of look at it this way. You could look at it as if you've kind of you've done archaeology. You've worked on all these digs, and you've been in museums, and that's been really amazing. But maybe you could think about, well, is there something else that you would like to do now that you've knocked that off your list? That would be a thing that people couldn't push back on you like this. And the first thing that came to my head was, well, I'd love to be a writer, and writing you do at home on your computer, and no one kind of sees you, and they can't sit there and tell you, well, you can't write because you can't see.
It's beautiful.
Exactly. So I sort of, but I didn't really know how writers actually earn money, so I did what any self-respecting millennial would do, and I Googled how to make a living as a writer. And and this was sort of 2010, maybe 2009, 2000, maybe even earlier than that. And I sort of started trying to do all the things that were on the list. So I started doing freelance writing. I started a blog because blogs were super big back then. I kind of started talking to people I knew who ran businesses, and just asking them if they needed any writing done, that kind of thing. And I dragged out this old manuscript, like a vampire story that I'd been writing on and off all through university, and I dragged that out and I polished it off and I sent it off, and I ended up working with a publisher for a few years on that manuscript, and then another couple of manuscripts, and I think it was 2011-ish, 12-ish, I got the news. Finally, after all these years of work, I had a publishing deal, and it was so exciting. It was amazing. And then the editor I was working with retired, and the publishing house used that as kind of an excuse to cut half of her line back. And I was one of the authors that got cut. So before my book was even published, was out the door, and back to where I started from. And it was around that time when people like Hugh Howey, Amanda Hocking, J.A. Conrad, sort of the really early self-publishers, were starting to talk about, how they published all these books and put them on sale for 99 cents, and all these people were buying them on Kindles. And around that time, I also got given a Kindle, and I was starting to read more books as ebooks, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because I could make all my books large print, and I could carry around these big heavy paperbacks, but it was only like this little tiny device. It was the coolest thing. And so I was super excited, and I decided that I would self-publish, just as an experiment. I would self-publish the series that got that the publisher kicked off. And I did that sort of 2013, 2014, started doing that, and it didn't sell very well, but I was super, it was so much fun. I was so excited about having my own book in my hands and kind of seeing the sales come in and trying different things and choosing my own cover, and it just super appealed to me. And so I was doing that, and I was starting to think that this really was what I wanted to do with my life, was just write books and publish them. And so one day I went to a party, and a friend of mine was talking about 50 Shades of Grey, which was super big at the time. And I was kind of trashing it a bit, which, a lot of people do. And she was getting a little bit annoyed with me, which is completely fair, because, you shouldn't trash other people's work, and you shouldn't trash other people's taste in books. So she was getting a bit annoyed with me. She said, well, it's not like you could write a book like that. And I sort of said, yeah, well, you're probably right. But in my head, I was going, well, challenge accepted. And so in complete secret, without telling anyone, not even my husband, I wrote this little 30,000 word paranormal romance novella. And I published that under a secret pen name, which is not secret anymore, which was Steffanie Holmes. I just took my first name, and then I took the name of a fictional husband I would have liked, it was Sherlock Holmes. And I published this little paranormal romance under this pen name, and I thought, well, in a year's time or so, I'd probably tell my friend about it and we'd have a bit of a laugh. And then it sold 1,000 copies in the first week. And
incredible.
I went, oh, wow, okay. So I sort of sheepishly had to tell my husband, well, I'd actually sort of made a bit of money off my self-publishing this month, but it wasn't from my super serious, super dark science fiction books. It was from my silly little paranormal romance novella. And when he stopped laughing about it, he said, well, you're going to write some more? And I thought, well, yes, I am. And so I finished off that series in sort of 4 or 6 weeks or something, and then I just kept writing them because it was so much fun, and I was just having a blast. And readers were asking, what's next? Can I have more? I want to learn more about the world. And so I just kept writing them, and I discovered that I was secretly a romance author.
Fantastic.
And that was sort of 2015, and basically I've been publishing approximately a book every 2 months ever since. And February 2018 I quit my day job as a copywriter at a tech company. And thank you. And I've been hanging out at home with the cat horde, writing books ever since.
Fantastic. I'd love to dive into the moment in which that first 1,000 copies sold, because obviously that's a dream moment for a lot of authors who are trying to make it as a full-time author, people who are really sort of like pursuing that career. And one thing that I'm massively interested about in that moment is, from what it sounds like, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, the books you were originally writing were the ones that you felt like you should be writing, the stuff that you wanted to write. They were the stuff that were what I'd probably say would be what you thought were true to you. And
Yes.
then you made this other book, had a bit of fun with it, and obviously that was the one that accelerated into success. Now, in that moment, I know a lot of people would, myself included, would struggle to make the choice between, do I go for the profitability with the series that's fun, or do I stick with what my gut is telling me at that time and go for the books that I think I'm passionate about more? How did that decision come around for you? Was it as simple as, I had fun, this is going to make money, versus the other side, or was it sort of more than that? Can you talk us through that kind of process for you?
It was really interesting. I think to a certain extent, I had been reading a lot about self-publishing and how to be successful and things like this. And I think my goal was very clear from the beginning, which was that I wanted to quit my job. I wanted to write books full time. And I think when I wrote that book, the romance book, it was so much fun, and it was quite nice to write a book where I didn't have to go and research lots of things. Not to say that I don't do research for my romance books, because I do, but my science fiction series, which, yes, I thought was the kind of thing I wanted to write. I wanted to be the next China Mayville. Was set in, it was kind of a super dark steampunk book, and it was set in an alternative history Georgian England. And so I kept having to run off and do all this research, and it was very heavily historically based. And so, they probably, each book, there's 3 books in the series, they're about 150,000 words each. And they probably took me, I think the first one took me 4 or 5 years to write, and the second one took me 2 years, kind of thing. So they took a lot of effort. And for that effort, I wasn't seeing readers love them as much as I loved them. And I think when you just see it in front of you in black and white, those numbers, I sold 10 copies of the first book in my science fiction series last month, and I sold 1,000 copies of this book in a week. And I think when you see it on paper like that, and you go, well, they were both equally fun to write. And this one sold 1,000 copies, and this one sold 10 copies, and this one's got readers begging to find out the next bit, and this one, doesn't. And I think, I think almost the readers made the decision for me. Yeah. Or that's how I felt about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that.
And the other thing.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say the other thing about it that was quite interesting was, because I was publishing the science fiction under my own name, I had a lot of personal attachment to it. Yes. And that meant that I was making decisions based on what I liked, which is very different from making decisions based on the market or what the readers want. So, I chose covers based on what I liked. I wrote the blurb based on, what's a book I would read. I did all those things, even the plot and everything like that was all based on, what I wanted. And then when I wrote the romance book, because I was doing it just sort of as this personal challenge, it was almost as if I took myself out of it to a certain extent, because I was writing under a pen name that I never intended to show anyone. It didn't bother me what the cover looked like. So I just hired a designer. I think my first cover cost me $50 or something. And I just said, make a cover that readers would like. And to write the blurb, I read 20 other blurbs, and I thought, well, this is what readers like to read in the blurb, so I'm going to write something that sounds kind of like this. And I think it was that sort of accidental shift in mindset from going, from making it all about me to being about me, but also about the readers, was a big key. I think a big key to the difference, between the sales. Yeah.
I love that so much, because it resonates a lot with some of my own stuff that I've been doing, in that there's a genre that I like to think I'm known more for, but it's definitely not the one that's earning me the most royalty. So I'm in the middle of that kind of mindset shift of, okay, moving away from the thing which I do generally love from the heart, but into the stuff that I can deliver, that people are waiting for, that is actually making the income that keeps me full-time writing. And that mentality itself is something that I know a lot of people may not necessarily have faced, but have thought about. That I guess it's almost it's coming to terms with. I'm trying to think of the best word here, because it would be what people associate with selling out, but selling out isn't necessarily a negative thing. And I don't necessarily think that's particularly in your case what this is. It's a case of finding the best logical solution for the goal that you wanted to achieve, and then just putting all the eggs in that basket and going for it. And obviously seeing the rewards of it carry you further down the lane. Sort of 6 years later, you're still obviously writing these books and doing well with them.
Exactly. And, a lot of it's really interesting because, I didn't know that I was a romance reader, but I actually was. It's just that the books that I read, I thought they were kind of fantasy books, but really what they were was paranormal romances. And so I didn't really realize that I was a romance reader, but I was. So to a certain extent, I knew the genre quite well because those are the kind of books I read. And I knew the kind of science fiction I wanted to write as well because I read those books, but it's a much harder kind of genre to the types of books I like to much harder, much more sort of nebulous genre to kind of get into. And what I didn't realize at the time was that the readers who read that genre are very, that they're definitely going to judge a book as being self-published, whereas in romance that's not really a thing that happens. I agree. I mean, selling it, I don't think really, people accuse artists and musicians and writers and stuff of selling out, but we've got to pay the bills, and no one accuses a computer programmer or a nurse of selling out. How dare you not nurse me for free, or how dare you go and get a higher paying job? Like, it's a weird thing that we only say to authors and things. And I think more avant-garde, if you will, kind of work. It's important that it's produced, but it's also the kind of thing you can do alongside work that that maybe appeals to more people and brings in that income. And it's perfectly fine to kind of do a few different things. But you gotta pay the bills. And I think if you're able to make a living doing this and you're having fun doing it, which is the key for me, then who cares what you're writing.
I love it. I do just want to be clear then, that wasn't accusing you in any way of selling out at all.
No, I realise that.
No, I think that the idea of people, particularly people that aren't hitting their goals or being where they want to be, accusing the people that are accelerating and doing well of selling out. I think there's just a certain level of, like you say, it's a mindset shift, and it's something that you get to a point where you realise, number one, like you say, it's fun, and number two, you do what you got to do. But one thing that you alluded to a little bit earlier that I was going to come on and ask is, you mentioned that your first book obviously took a couple of years to write. Your next book got a bit quicker. Your next book got a bit quicker. What happened? And correct me if I'm wrong in this, but this is just sort of from looking through your back catalogue and sort of the release dates. What happened in 2017, 2018 that accelerated your releases so much? Because the amount of books that came out in 2018 and 2019 under your name is impressive.
So, I mean, 2018, 2019, I was full time, so that's a pretty big thing.
That's a key one.
So I suddenly had a lot more time. I have been releasing pretty regularly since 2015. I don't think I got much. I don't think I really got faster. I think I've been roughly sort of 6 books. I think some years have been 7 books, some years have been 8 books, but sometimes the books are shorter. 2016, I made a lot of mistakes. So what I did was I released a book that went really well. So then instead of releasing the next book of that series, I went off and did a co-writing project, and I did some books under my other pen name, and I did all these different things which weren't focusing on what I was good at. And so I'm pretty sure I did do the same amount of books that year, but they're all spread all over the place, and some of them I've recently unpublished about 3 or 4 books from around that time, which I'm going to do a little bit of a re-edit on and republish. So I did have stuff from around that time, but I made that mistake, and in 2017, sort of the end of 2016, I was looking back on well, this year hasn't been working for me, so what's not working, and what am I going to do in 2017 to make it work? So I just focused really hard on from pretty much from then on releasing, not spreading myself too thin, so just doing the thing that works again and again and again. So next book in the series, not being distracted by shiny things over there, and just focusing on giving my readers more and more of the things that they want.
How did you begin to build up that relationship with your readers? You say that obviously in the beginning they were reaching out, you had people asking you for the next book, for certain things to resolve. How did you cultivate that readership, and is that the practices that you took then the same that you continue through to how you interact with them today?
Pretty much. So in the earlier days, I didn't really do social media kind of things for my books. Like, I had social media, but it was more about just me personally, and I didn't really use it that much. But what I did have was, I had the two things that were really big. Was I've always done cliffhangers in the backs of my books, like really mean cliffhangers, last page and you think someone's dead, or it looks like the hero's a murderer, or there's some big horrible twist in like the last sentence. So I've always been real mean with cliffhangers. And then I tend to put I kind of tend to, underneath that, sort of directly underneath that, I tend to put a link to the next book that's on pre-order, and I tend to put a link to my newsletter. And I have done newsletter bonuses, like bonus epilogue scenes and alternative scenes and stuff like that on the newsletter. And then when people sign up to the newsletter, there's like a little sequence they go through, like a kind of welcome sequence. And a lot of that sequence is kind of about getting them to reply to my emails. And so especially in the earlier days, when sort of before kind of like Google was shuffling emails off to a different tab, I was getting a lot of replies to my emails of people commenting on the things that I'd said in that welcome sequence. And it kind of builds that it makes them feel really, so readers feel like they've got this really personal relationship with you. And so, and then they email and they tell me which books were their favourites, and why they liked this character, and why this book was important to them, and why they love romance books in general. And all that information is, as an author, is super useful, because it's basically market research. And so I've kind of been talking to my readers since then. And then 2017. 2018, around then, I started a private Facebook group for my readers, and that's just kind of accelerated things. Because you can go on there and you can ask them what book are you reading this week, and you can run a poll and get all their answers to the poll, and what they love is a book has a really mean cliffhanger, and they love to have like a thread on the group where they can talk about the cliffhanger and what they think's happened, and who they think's responsible. So they love doing stuff like that. So so I love that kind of really personal relationship with them, and I do think that helps them feel really connected to me, and keeps them coming back to read more books, I hope.
Fantastic. One thing, obviously, we mentioned in the intro that all of this you are managing despite the fact that you are unable to, or you've been declared legally blind. How does someone like yourself pump out so many words? How do you get involved in so many things? Because obviously there is a physical hindrance there, but it doesn't seem to have had any impact on your determination, your drive, or stopped you in any way at all. And in fact, it seems to have propelled you further than a lot of people who are obviously of their full facilities, their full faculties.
Well, thank you. Maybe. I don't know. This is my dream career. So I kind of feel like now I've got it. I'm not gonna let it go, and I'm not gonna fail due to my own inactivity, kind of thing. So what do? I try to write. I used to try when I had my day job. I used to try and write 2,000 words a day. That was always my goal. And a lot of the time, I would do those 2,000 words. Like I used to bus to work, so I would take up my laptop on the bus, and I usually get 500 words, 1,000 words on a 30-minute bus trip. So I would do a lot. I try and do it on the bus. I try and do it in my lunch hours. I, you know, I sort of made a promise to myself when I got into the tech sector, because the tech industry is very, they kind of like you to basically live to work. And a lot of my colleagues, their entire social life was centered around the office, and they would often be there, they'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they'd still be there at 7 o'clock at night, kind of thing. And I made a very solid promise to myself that I was not going to be like that. And so I would basically give the company myself for 40 hours a week, which is what they paid me for. And then if something was urgent, I would do it. But my definition of urgent would sometimes be very different to their definition of urgent, because I was just a writer, and sometimes my managers would send me stuff at 8 p.m. at night and say, look, could you urgently edit this for me? And they weren't urgent at all. They're just the things that could be done. It doesn't matter if it was done then or if it was done, at 8 a.m. the following morning. It's not urgent at all. So I wouldn't do it. I'd wait till 8 p.m. 8 a.m. the next day. And so, maybe I missed out on some promotions because, that was my promise that I made to myself. But, it was more important to me that at the end of 40 hours, my creative energy, the energy that I had left was my own to use. And I wasn't going to give any more of that to a company than, what they were paying me for, because it's quite important to me. So I try and write 2,000 words a day, and I try not to beat myself up if I didn't do it. But if you're doing 2,000 words a day, and I try to do that on the weekends as well, and that can be 60,000 words a month, which is a book. That's essentially a book a month, and it wouldn't be quite that. So that's how I ended up with a book every 2 months. And nowadays I try to do 4,000 words a day, 2,000 in the morning, 2,000 in the afternoon. And I do usually get that most days, although often the 2,000 words in the afternoon will be on something other than fiction. So I'm not quite doing 4,000 words of fiction every single day. But I'm definitely doing that amount of wordage. And if you can get your word count up, and the words that you produce are, you're keeping most of them, then eventually you just produce stuff. And that's pretty much my system. It's too much fun, so why stop?
I love it. There's so much of what you just said that is, I think, something that is missing from the mentality of people working what I'd call working for the machine. Because I used to work in a marketing role. I used to be a marketing manager before that. I worked my way up from that, but I learned quite late into that career process about the idea of setting those definitive boundaries about what should and shouldn't be expected from yourself. And I know a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine who work similar 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever jobs, who use their work as an excuse not to do the things that they love. And I think what you're saying there about doing the hours that you've been paid for and sticking with that, unless it is a state of emergency. And like you say, not everyone's state of emergency matches up to yours, because managers' state of emergencies are so different. And what you'll often find is if you ignore an emergency for a couple of hours, it disappears by itself anyway, which is
exactly
a key tip for anyone listening. But I was definitely the same. I worked my ass off until I was burned out while trying to write when I was in the day job. And then it wasn't until the final sort of 6 months or so that I kind of went, no, I'll clock in at this time. I'll leave at this time. That's what I'm getting paid for. Anything else? Because once you start working overtime and slipping into those routines and missing lunches, you are then setting the expectation for your managers, your superiors, your colleagues about what they can expect from you thereon. You're setting that standard for them. It's not the other way around. So I think that's sort of sage advice, just to say, stick with your boundaries, go for it. But what I wonder is, is where did that mentality come from for you? Was that always just how you saw it the minute you got your job? It was a gateway to what you wanted to do, or was there like an event that triggered that in you? How did that come about?
I don't really know, actually. I think I have always wanted to work for myself. I just didn't sort of quite articulate that. My dad is so he works for himself. He's a builder, and probably watching him, and he's worked for himself for a very long time, since I was 4 or 5 or something. He's run his own business, and I think so. I think watching him do that, as a child, even though I didn't realize it at the time, kind of made me want to have that, and see the advantages and the disadvantages of having that. So I think I always wanted to work for myself. I just didn't really know how to get there. And I don't know. I remember someone said to me, or I read somewhere something that someone had said, and it always kind of stuck with me, which was that it was something like, don't use your creative energy, or be careful of using your creative energy to make someone else rich.
Yes.
And when I got into the tech sector, that was a big thing that kind of that kind of governed my thinking, because a big part of there's a big culture in tech, and so I was at companies where they would sort of once a month they'd award an award to an employee who was doing a really great job, and very often that really great job was more about they're the first one in the morning and they're the last one to leave, and they're always they're on call weekend for us, and I'm probably a little bit competitive, and I would possibly every month I would think, oh gosh, I'd really like to have that award, but
that's how they get you.
Exactly, but that's how they get you. And they would be very big on telling you what the numbers were of the company every month, and being very clear about very open and honest about how well the company was doing, which is usually very well, so that everyone would be really engaged with building the product and helping the company meet its goals and stuff. But I would always look at that and think, this is energy I could be spending doing this for myself. So that's what I did.
And that's so key. Again, kind of beating that nail over the head, but I think it's so important that the thing that resonated with me when I sort of discovered that truth was how willing I was at one point to expend all my energy into the role I was doing, and then come home and be tired around my son and my then partner. When you look at that in reverse, that shouldn't make sense, because the parts of your life that you choose are the parts that aren't necessarily with work. So why aren't you giving your energy, the best of your energy, to the sides that you want to help grow, help flourish, as opposed to the stuff that you kind of have to do to make money? It's just a weird twist that I see people have in their heads. But I mean, obviously some people like the 9 to 5 and that works for them, but I think just the principle of, like you say, giving that creative energy to the areas of your life that you have control over, you want to push forward and accelerate. And obviously for you, that then led well into this career of writing. So
Exactly.
I think it's a fantastic point to hit on. Why, I know obviously we've addressed why you split it down into 2 pen names. Something I'm curious about is, how do you find managing those 2 pen names now? Because I know myself on a few occasions have thought about going under a couple of pen names. I know listeners will have considered this as well. What are the sort of pros and cons in your mind of running 2 pen names?
So basically where I'm at in my career right now, which is sort of different than from when I was in 2014-15 when I started the second name, is that Steffanie Holmes, my romance pen name, basically pays all the bills. And so she is very tightly branded. So her branding is very tight. So if you read a Steffanie Holmes book, you pick up any kind of Steffanie Holmes book, you know exactly what you're getting. And a reader can read through my entire catalogue, and they won't come across a single book where they're like, oh, that is a weird book to be here. So, and that's very, very, very deliberate. And when I had SC Green in the beginning, I just thought, this is my name, so everything I'm going to write is going to come under that. But then when I was sort of looking at researching how to do how to self-publish successfully. This kind of pen name, this idea of pen names that are tightly branded came up, and there were a lot of benefits. The algorithms on Amazon will recommend you to more of the right people because you've got a very well-defined audience. It's just that reader expectation kind of thing, because readers, we as authors, we often read quite widely, but people who are readers, they very often have like a specific genre they just read again and again and again, and they don't really deviate from that genre, and so they don't want it. When they pick up a book, they want a really specific experience from it, and they don't want to be surprised. And so if you have lots of different stuff under one name, then readers, they don't know what they're going to get when they pick a book up, and it makes them less inclined to pick a book up, sort of thing. And they don't cross over very well. Like your mystery readers won't usually cross over to your romance books, or your romance readers won't cross over to your young adult fantasy books. Some of them will, but not as many as if they were just all the same genre, which I guess is the big pro. What I'm doing now is I'm kind of looking at my other non-romance books and starting to think about how can I more tightly brand that, and what do I actually want to do with that other pen name. So I'm actually in the process of rebranding my other pen name. So I'm going from SC Green to Steff Green, because I've decided I want my name as part of the brand. And I've got my old science fiction series, my dark science fiction series, but I think that's probably the only one I'm going to write of those. And I have another series under that name which I've co-written with another writer, which is a sort of a post-apocalyptic series. And we've got a final book to write in that series, which we keep putting off. And but that's actually I'm actually going to be rebranding that under Steffanie Holmes, because I think it's got enough romance in it. It's got a happily ever after that I think those readers will enjoy it. So I'm actually going to rebrand that. I'm going to take that off that name, rebrand that under the other name, and then I'm just going to use Steff Green for my non-fiction writing books, of which I have a few now, and for sort of random, interesting non-romance, weird fiction projects, if you will, that are going to go into that pen name. So I did 2 years ago, I did a Kickstarter for a children's picture book, which was called Only Freaks Turn Things into Bones, and it's about a little group. It's about a little grim reaper who gets bullied, and and we were successful, myself and an illustrator friend, and so that book came out 2019, and so that's under that pen name, and we're currently working on another book, another illustrated book, and so those kind of things are going to go under that pen name. So I quite like that as it's kind of a catch-all pen name for non-romance related projects, and it's okay if those projects don't earn a ton of money for the effort put in, because Steffanie Holmes is my bread and butter. Yeah,
I love it. So many plates spinning in the air. As someone who co-writes a lot of books myself, I am curious, how did your co-writing partnership come about with your co-writer, and what does that look like now?
It looks like we're two very busy people. It's a little bit too focused on our more successful non-co-written books to finish our series that we started. So I can't actually remember how it came about. I think she was looking for a co-writer, and I'd read one of her books and thought it was quite good, and thought, hey, I could do that. It'd be interesting, instead of writing more books in my successful series, I'll go do something else. That's a really sensible business decision. And I loved everything about the process except for, so she's a wonderful writer. I love the books that we produced. I enjoyed working with her. What I don't like about it is I feel as though it was exactly the same amount of work as it would have been to write the book myself.
Yes.
And I earn half the money, and I think that's the way she feels as well, really. And for that reason, I think that's why we keep putting off this third and final book. Yeah.
Double the work
So,
for half the result, or the same amount of work for half the result.
Exactly. So so I think I really enjoyed the process as kind of as a creative experiment, but I would not be in a hurry to do it again. And I love my co-writer. She's amazing writer.
Yeah. I think that is something that a lot of people don't see, because I think particularly I've co-written across various different methods and styles of co-writing, but yeah, I think the one thing that people do expect is that it is going to be half the work. And obviously, if you're trying to pour the passion and the respect into the book that you're trying to do, it doesn't remove any of those levels. It just kind of means that you've got two of you adding your eyes onto there. And I mean, for me anyway, I found that the projects that I produced with my co-writers was always stronger than I probably could have come up with myself. But yeah, it's still, like you say, still the same amount of work putting in. So it's definitely something for people to consider.
Exactly. And you know, there's lots of people that really love it. A lot of my close author friends, you know, their entire pen name is co-written. And they're just, you know, if you have a really close relationship with another writer, it can be a really amazing way to work. And especially if you're trying to do something where you're trying to release a lot of books really quickly, kind of thing, it can be amazing.
Yes.
But yeah, just definitely not for me.
Fair enough. We are annoyingly we're starting to run out of time. This is absolutely flown, which is really annoying because I have a lot more questions, but I am going to dive into my Patreon questions. So my guys that support me over at patreon.com/greatwritershare put forward questions every week to the guests on the show, and I've got a small selection here that I'm just going to throw at you, and obviously take these whichever way you want to go.
Awesome.
The first question is, what is your top productivity tip or the go-to habit that keeps you on track?
So when I don't do this every day, but when I am faltering and I'm looking at Facebook more than I'm writing, what I usually do is I put a timer on for 20 minutes and I close all my tabs on my browser except for the one with my Google Doc in it, and I just put the timer on and I write for 20 minutes. And I think it flips a switch in my head, which kind of says, this is a competition and you're competing against yourself. And I love to win, love to compete, I think. So in 20 minutes, I will usually get somewhere between 400 and 700 words. And then I'll jump up from a chair and I'll take like a couple of minutes break, and then I'll go back to the computer. I'll do another 20 minutes. And that will usually, if I'm floundering, that'll usually knock out my 2,000 words in an hour and a half. Yeah. And then I'll celebrate.
Nice, fantastic advice. How do you reward yourself when you've completed a project?
So how do I do that? So usually
I'm very interested in this because I do not do it myself.
I'm probably pretty bad, because usually when I am finishing a project, especially if it's like the last book in a series, all I want to do is start the next book. So often the reward is just starting the next book. I have to go into the city to print out my manuscript on paper so that my husband, who's my beta reader, can read it. So when I finish the draft that I give to him, and I have to go into the city, I will usually take myself out for a nice lunch. And I'll, often by myself, sometimes with a friend, and I'll just take my Kindle along and I'll order all the food I want and I'll read my book for an hour or two, and that's a really nice reward. And sometimes I'll just take half a day off and I'll just sit on the couch and read a book or do a puzzle or watch a movie I've been really desperate to see or something like that. Yeah, because I think it is really important to reward yourself and, remember why you're doing this. And that writing a book is a really big achievement. Yeah.
What's your favourite place to write?
Oh, my desk.
Nice and simple.
Nice and simple. I have a beautiful office in the house that we've made, and it's kind of coloured. The walls are like a blood red kind of colour, and I've got big black floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that are completely filled with books, and my desk is like a really old-fashioned lawyer's desk. And my husband's made me a stand for my computer screen, so it sits really close to my face, and I've got this beautiful big curved screen, and it's just it's like perfectly set up for me, and it's just the best. And there's cats that sit on the desk all day while I write, so it's just perfect. I just love it.
Additional question on top of that, just from my own curiosity as well. What was your favourite place before the house was built? Because obviously that sounds like it was almost spec built to exactly how you wanted it. So I can't blame you for sitting at that desk all day. Where would it have been beforehand?
I mean, I don't know if I really... I mean, I would usually write at home at a desk in the corner of our bedroom. But I'm not sure I really thought of it as, this is my favourite place to write. It's just, that was
where you write.
That was where I wrote. Yeah. So... but it's cool because when we built the house, obviously I could make my writing space however I wanted. So I basically just built the dream library, and it's great.
Sounds incredible. Sounds beautiful. We are coming up to the quick fire round now. So as with all of my guests, I finish off the interviews with 10 questions that I fire at you as quickly as possible. Feel free to try and reply as quickly as possible. But if any questions do stump you, you are allowed to pass, and that is okay because there is nothing at stake here. Okay. First question: ketchup or mayonnaise?
We call it tomato sauce in New Zealand, but ketchup.
Megadeth or Iron Maiden?
That's really tough, but Iron Maiden.
What's your preferred method of transport?
Train.
Or
or really tiny airplane.
Nice.
Hot airplane.
Caesar salad or 12-ounce rump steak?
Rump steak.
What are you currently reading?
Oh, what am I currently reading?
This stumps a lot of people.
Yeah, because I'm reading like 5 books at once. I'm reading a book called A is for Arsenic, which is about all the different poisons used in Agatha Christie novels.
Interesting.
And it's an awesome book.
Yeah. Who was the last writer to make you laugh?
I don't remember her name, but the book is called The Flat Share, and it's like a rom-com book about a woman and a man who are sharing a flat. Where he works night shift, so they're sharing the bed. He works night shift, and she sleeps in the bed, and then she works during the day, and he sleeps in the bed. And it was hilarious. The Flat Share. Can't remember the author's name.
Okay, if you could narrow down your success to one single person, who would it be?
My success.
Yes.
Me.
Yeah, I like it. Do you have any siblings?
Yes, one sister.
Do you have a favourite word?
Eldritch.
What's one Christmas present you wished you got but never received?
Oh, I would really like, if this is Christmas, I really like someone to get me for Christmas, which I've never got, like a voucher to go and fly a plane.
Ah, love it. What's your favourite song of all time?
Really hard, but Into My Arms, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Beautiful. Fantastic. That's 10 questions. One bonus question. Where can our listeners find out everything about you and all that you're working on?
Awesome. So I have a website, www.steffmetal, steffmetal.com, which is where you can find out all about my fiction work. And for my non-fiction for writers, you can go to www.rageagainstthemanuscript.com. And I've got a book there called How to Rock Self-Publishing. I run a self-publishing course, and there's a whole bunch of free resources and videos and articles and stuff for writers, and that's really cool. So yeah, that's probably the two best places.
Beautiful. As you can tell, there's so much we didn't get to cover in this interview, but we might have to look up hooking another date up and getting you back on the show. It's been an absolute blast.
I'm super keen.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Steff. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Great Writers Share podcast. Next week, I'll be talking to Craig Falconer, sci-fi author. Don't forget you can get early access to every episode of the Great Writers Share podcast and the chance to ask upcoming guests any of your questions just by becoming a patron of the show. All you need to do is visit www.patreon.com/Great Writers Share and support the show for as little as $1 a month. One more time, that's www.patreon.com/greatwritershare. Until next time.